Welcome to In Conversation With, a podcast where I get to talk to my favorite artists, esotericists, writers, organizers, and people who I think are doing really interesting shit in the world. I'm your host, Shay the Catskills, a queer artist, tarotist, intuition facilitator, pleasure activist, organizer, library clerk, and author of the book Tarot as Questions, published by Cosmic Doghouse Press. I am living on Esopus land, currently known as the town of Shandaken, Ulster County, New York, in the Catskill Mountains. Today, I have the great good fortune of speaking with Brett Barry. Brett hosts and produces Kaatscast from Silver Hollow Audio, a bi-weekly podcast on Catskills history, arts, and the outdoors. Brett teaches podcasting and audio production in the digital media and journalism department at SUNY New Paltz. He graduated from Syracuse University's television, radio, and film program and worked as an associate documentary producer for several years before launching a career in voiceovers in 2002. He returned to Syracuse 10 years later for a graduate degree in television, radio, and film. He's represented in New York City by Access Talent for television and radio commercials, audiobooks, promos, and narration. He's the host of public radio's Soundbeat, was the longtime voice of India's English language network Zee Café, and the last announcer for the iconic soap opera Guiding Light. He's narrated more than 125 audiobooks and is a proud member of SAG-AFTRA. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Brett, welcome to In Conversation With. Thank you for making the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Shay. It's an honor to be on this show. Thanks for having me.
So let's check in. How are we arriving? What is the state of your body, heart, mind in this moment?
I knew this question was coming, and I wish that we could get multiple choice, but I'm arriving in a very decent state. It's a beautiful day in the Catskills. It's very spring-like. Climate change is real, but I'm enjoying parts of it. And so it was nice to be outside, even if that meant cleaning out the car. It was just really nice to breathe in that air and hear some birds that you don't normally hear this time of year, who are lingering, I think, or coming back. I don't know, but hearing all kinds of things that aren't typical for this time of year. So all is good. Got a lot going on in a good way.
Well, we had our own little personal check-in before I hit record, which I was very grateful for. And I got to sort of give you the sort of longer version of how I'm arriving. I'm arriving okay. I feel tender. I feel the world makes me feel tender and enraged and many other things. And the Halloween parade is going on at Phoenicia Elementary right around the corner. And so I've been watching the kids go up and down the street in their costumes and, these beautiful fall colors. And I have all the windows open and, it is like a second summer. And I was talking to a student of mine recently, and she was saying, we can feel kind of horrified by that, or we can also just enjoy it. And so that's kind of what I hear you saying, kind of what I'm up to here too.
Yeah, do what you can. But aside from that, what's the option? You have to just embrace what's given to us. So whether that's something that we've brought on ourselves as the larger we, or something that we have otherwise no control over. But you have what a bird's eye view you have of the parade route. That's perfect.
Yeah, I love living right on 214 and watching the world go by. So I was kind of delighted. I joked with you that this episode is going to have the best sound quality of any episode that I've ever done because we're both podcasters. You were asking me about the levels before I hit record, and I was like, I don't know. That's your department. But I was psyched to talk about like how we know each other and how we met, because I love this story so much. Can I tell it? And then if you want to add something. Okay. So we actually met. You emailed me because I work at the Olive Free Library, and you emailed me about Catscast and about, the podcast and getting the word out. And I started listening to it. And I'm actually linking to a couple of my favorite episodes in the show notes here. We'll talk about those. But I remember I was in what was my art studio is now my bedroom. I was in my art studio listening to the, what are those called? The stone cairns on,
Parents, yeah,
yeah,
on over.
on Overlook Mountain. There was an episode about them. And it was such a great episode. And I emailed you afterwards and I had a few questions and you were like super responsive. You like answered right away and we had some back and forth. And you realized that I also was doing a podcast. And I actually ended up doing a reading for a family member of yours. And then you asked to interview me for your podcast. But my favorite part of the story is that you and Rebecca invited me over for chicken piccata with your family. And afterwards we watched Jeopardy together. And it was like the most like amazing, delicious, wholesome, like family time I'd spent. It was a dark winter for me. And it was just that was such a bright spot. And so we've been kind of knowing each other since then. And you're in the library from time to time doing projects. So that's how we know each other. Is there anything you want to like say or add to that?
And nothing like pulling the dinner guest into a Jeopardy competition right off the bat. One of our family shows, although we've been watching less of it now that my oldest has gone off to college.
Oh,
So it's unfortunate. But yeah, and I remember the email that you sent me, the first communication about that podcast. You had asked why we hadn't. You said, well, I loved it and it was great information and, gave it the praise first. But then came your question of why we hadn't interviewed or had we considered interviewing anybody Indigenous. And so I think I answered that to your satisfaction. And then,
totally.
and partially because there aren't really any Indigenous people left in this area who are native to this area, as opposed to other areas in the state, like Onondaga people still live in and around Syracuse, that type of thing. So, but I think we solved that problem. Well, kind of. With our last couple of episodes ago, we did one on Indigenous Catskills, and
With Jason Wexler, I'm linking to it. That is one of my favorite episodes.
Justin.
If
Yeah.
if Oh, Justin, thank you. I'm going to correct that right before I like put the wrong thing. Justin Wexler.
And
He was
he's
so,
also not Indigenous, but of everyone I've ever heard from in this area who can talk about this topic, he's the best.
I mean, he's in actual relationship with the descendants of people who lived on this land. Like he's in actual like hosting people on his land. It was a very beautiful episode. It felt very responsible and very detailed and just beautiful. I mean, I really, you were so responsive to my question, which I really appreciated. And then I feel like this episode was just kind of like a sort of, because you just had your 100th episode, am I right? And the Overlook Mountain one is the most popular episode. Is that right?
It is. It's
Yeah.
on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great episode. And so this one that you did recently with Justin Wexler just felt like such an expansion on everything that previous episode had opened up. So huzzah to you. It was great.
Thanks. See, that listener feedback pays off, Shay. Probably was stuck in the back of my head for months and months, and we finally got some good, legitimate Indigenous information out there.
Yeah, I mean,
Come by.
what I thought was really interesting, well, there were so many interesting things in that episode with Justin, but when you asked him about land acknowledgements, I just so appreciated that. That was sort of like, he's sort of like, yeah, and it was, what I appreciated about the episode? It was subtle and nuanced and that he's a person that this is what his whole life is about. And he's not, pretending to be anything that he's not. And he just seemed like had a lot of integrity in what he's doing. And you're, like I've said, you're a superlative interlocutor. So you're always going to bring out the great story there.
I love
Yeah.
that. I still need to put that on my website. Superlative interlocutor, Shay in the Catskills.
It's really true. When you came to interview me, I was so moved at like some of the questions that you asked. It was such an amazing experience. The other favorite episode that we have to talk about is Bill Getz and dowsing for water. Like, Can you tell me, how did you find him or find out about him? And like, what is he like? What's he like as a person?
He came to us through a program because I'm also on the board of the John Burroughs Woodchuck Lodge in Roxbury, which is the summer home retirement cabin of the famed naturalist John Burroughs, who grew up on that farm and then, eventually found his way back to it for the last 10 years or so of his life. And so during the summer, we do Wild Saturdays, which is the first Saturday of each month. There's a speaker, usually something about wildlife, nature, something literary, maybe. So that is sponsored financially speaking through the Catskill Watershed Corporation. So, funnily enough, we're trying to link things to water as much as we can. And someone suggested dowsing. It's both coming from a water and kind of a historical and maybe folkloric, sense, and just to figure out what that's all about. And so this guy came and dowsed on the property and told us where the water veins are. And, it kind of went out there because his contention is that you can douse for all kinds of things, and that whatever you set your intention to, you can find it through this method, which, believe it or not, I don't know, but
He's
I
clearly doing it.
and I will say that if I ever had to dig a new well, I would definitely hire a dowser, because for a couple $100 to save maybe tens of thousands of dollars, because right here you can drill down 100 feet, but 10 feet over you have to drill down 700 feet. I definitely came away with a sense of, yeah, this is interesting, and probably there's something to it. Yeah, there's a little bit of mystery to it, but there's something to it.
I think it's the kind of thing, so many things struck me about him. I was just kind of like, okay, this person has found what he's supposed to be doing, and the way that he described his process, he kind of described it as if like, it would be obvious to anyone. This is just how first you do this, and then you do this, and this is how and it was just like, I imagine that when we had more of a connection to the land and didn't live such, lives mediated by artificial light and capitalism and so on and so forth, that probably it was something that was much more, someone in your family knew how to do that, or you knew someone who knew how to do that. And, it kind of sounded like from him that he's one of the only people in the area that does it, and he's very much in demand. Yeah, but it was just, it felt very, I felt like a kinship with him as like someone who practices kind of it's not esoteric, it's, land-based kind of, communication with the land, like quite literally, like where the water is.
Being in tune. And I don't know how much of that is the operator versus the practice. The tools aren't much. You can use coat hangers. So, intuition comes into it. There's all kinds of stuff.
Totally. Yeah. What an
I was no
interesting.
good at it. I tried my hand at it and forget it.
Really? Did he showed you how to do it and you tried it and it was like, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone who was there that day had a chance to try it out in the field after he spoke. And, with him, he goes out and the metal will just like fly to the side when he hits something. So,
Is he training people?
I, maybe on request, Shay.
Hmm. Hmm. Little side hustle over here. Huh.
Someone's got to pick it up and keep the tradition alive.
Interesting. Okay. Be in my bonnet. So I do want to say, like, congratulations, 100 episodes. That's incredibly impressive. It is such a great podcast for so many reasons. You talk to so many different kinds of people about so many different kinds of things. It's like, the basis of the podcast is the Catskills, and there's so much just there in that. And I'm curious how you feel like the podcast has evolved since when you started it to now. And kind of what has surprised you about, doing this body of work?
Well, when I first started it, I had already been doing audio production in the Catskills and for the Catskills. So there was a couple of grants that I worked through to do some audio driving guides. So those still exist. Drive28.com is where you can find those. And that was through the Catskill Mountain Scenic Byway was the first one that we worked with. And so that was kind of, more of a traditional audio guide where I kind of thought back to going to a place like Gettysburg and getting one of those cassette tapes and going around the battlefield with your car. And it would say, okay, this is this site. This is why it's important. Now get back in your car, make a left, make another left, and, hit pause. And when you get here, hit play again. So that was in my mind when I produced those. It's difficult in the Catskills with no or little cell service to do something like that. So so it was structured kind of the same way, like track one is this, track two, and it was timed. So if you go pretty much the speed limit, it was timed to Route 28. So if you start at
Wow.
this point in West Hurley and you end at this point in Andes, everything will make sense as you drive through. So that was fun. And I did a few of those. Then we spun off different tours for arts and culture, and we did one for outdoor adventure, and then we did one for the Mountain Clove Scenic Byway up in Tannersville area. And then I think I can't remember off the top of my head who suggested that we turn that into or make it available on a podcast platform because more people were starting to listen to podcasts. And also podcasts aren't reliant on cell service. They automatically kind of download in the background when you have Wi-Fi or something like that. And then when you're out in the world, they just magically appear. And so that's kind of how the podcast came about. So some of the first episodes were kind of repackaging some of that material that we had. And then, of course, I realized really quickly that we needed to produce a lot more because I wanted to keep this going regularly. I think that the quickest way to kill a podcast is to miss a deadline. And someone's expecting your show every week or every other week or every month, whatever that interval is. I think you have to be really responsible in upholding that contract with your listeners. So then we started producing all kinds of stuff, and I kind of follow what interests me, and I hope that that interests other people. One thing that I think has evolved also is that I've gone more, well, I haven't dropped I do a lot of kind of documentary style production, but I think it's okay to do straight up interviews once in a while. I think people enjoy that, sometimes more so. So I'm trying to incorporate more interviews into the process. And I still like to score them with music and all that stuff because I love that production process. But yeah, so it's constantly evolving. I work with a production intern every semester from SUNY New Paltz, and sometimes, depending on who I'm working with, that'll create other areas for ideas and interests that I haven't thought about. So that's really nice. I'm working with someone right now who's pitched a number of stories that we're working on right now.
It's so beautifully produced. It's just such a great, it's like great quality, beautifully produced. And, there's so many characters in the Catskills, that there's definitely a lot to work with. The sewing machine guy was another one of my favorite. It's like that kind of, it's sort of like Northern Exposure, kind of Twin Peaks, benign kind of, that's what it's like up here. A bunch of really interesting people who do really interesting things. And so I just am curious to hear you talk a little bit about, you drive by me sometimes on my morning walk. We live pretty close to each other. Just your relationship with this land and this place. And you've been up here for quite some time. And just, yeah, if you could say a little bit about what that is for you, the Stony Clove and just this whole gorgeous area, how that is.
Yeah, I started coming up here when I was 8, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I grew up on Long Island on the South Shore. And so to make a long story long, my parents we would come up here. We would all, I would come up with them to a friend's house in Woodland Valley. So that's how we started coming up to Woodland Valley. And then my parents wanted to get land and build, I remember even back then, like going around with a real estate agent and looking at properties with my parents.
Wow.
So that's still pretty vivid in my memory. And then they decided, let's buy land, we'll build something. And it so happened that my parents' doctor in Long Island had a piece of property up here. He said, well, uh, we're going to subdivide it and sell off some of the vacant land if you're interested. So it just happened to be this land that I'm on right now.
Wow.
In Silver Hollow. The land that I'm on was the doctor's property. The land that my parents are on was the original piece that he sold to them. So my parents lived next door. And then, fast forward to when my wife and I moved here, we built onto this house to turn it from a little seasonal cabin to a year-round residence for a family. But so I've been coming to this property since I was 10 years old. My parents built a log house on that property in the mid-80s. And then eventually the doctor and his wife were elderly. They couldn't come up anymore. And they asked my parents if they'd be interested in reuniting the property because that was first of mine. So they did that. And then the little house that was on that property was used for a long time as a guest house, that kind of thing, until Rebecca and I asked if we could come up from Northern Jersey at the time. So anyway, let's go back to when I was a kid and really fell in love with this area. I just remember fun weekends with a lot of cousins piling into the house that my parents built, and ski weekends and long summers. We'd come up for the whole summer. And I would spend a lot of time just wandering, going down to the creek and flipping stones and looking for crayfish and salamanders. And those were really special visits to this area and really stuck with me. Just the freedom to move around and explore, which I still love to do.
Yeah, it's so special up here. It's like, yeah, it's, when I do that walk every morning, I feel like that's church for me, is to be alongside the creek. It's just so incredibly beautiful.
I remember the creek would get me through a tough week, even when I went back to the island. I would think to myself, no matter what's happening, just think about the creek is still just running.
Doing its thing, right?
That's happening right now.
Yeah.
And that would center me even, in a horrible moment of middle school on the island.
Yeah, the healing power of that creek is really, really something,
Yeah. So I'm really fortunate that we were able to come back to this area as adults with our kid. Both of our kids were basically born here. Our first was born, and then we moved up, and then the second one was born here. So they've had their whole lives on this property. So it'll be interesting to see how it resonates with them as they get older, and if they want to come back or if they want to do something totally different.
What do you make of the different ways? I moved up here in 2006. The ways that, this particular, and I mean, this area, like where we live, has changed since, 9/11. There was an influx of people who moved in, the pandemic. There's an influx of people who have come in. There's, there's a lot of short-term rentals where we live. And just curious how you've seen because you've been up here for a long time. What are the most sort of salient things you've noticed that have changed? And, I don't want to be like, is it for the better, for the worse? Because it's such a boring question, but just how you've seen it change and what you think about that.
So we moved up here full time shortly before you did. We moved up in 2005. But yeah, as I said, I've been coming up since the mid-'80s, so I've seen some changes. I think that for the most part, well, I won't go back to whether it's good or bad because you say that that's boring, but I don't think there's anything really negative about what's happening. The short-term rentals is a problem. When they're owned by an LLC or a company that doesn't exist in this community. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Then it just becomes an investment property and there's no vested interest or stake in what goes on here. And you're pricing out locals. So I don't see that as a good thing. Otherwise, I think local businesses are adapting to what people want and need. Mm, I, I do wish that there were more some more useful establishments in town so that we didn't have to run to Kingston for basic necessities. I think there's always been really good restaurants in the area. They've changed, but there's still good restaurants in the area.
If you could have one kind of like place right in town on Main Street, like what kind of service would you like pick if it had to be one that's not there yet? Because we have a library, post office, pharmacy. Um,
The
yeah,
pharmacy's great. I love that we have a pharmacy in town again.
yeah.
That's really useful. I would love a nice little hardware store.
Morn Imports doesn't do it for you.
I don't want to call anything out for what I don't like, but a good hardware store.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, a good little food market. And I know there's a food market.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah.
Um, a bookstore would be nice. There was a
Mm.
bookstore briefly in town. It was in the Phoenicia Hotel.
I feel like we should have that.
It was
I fantasize, along with being a dowser and everything else that I do, I fantasize about opening up an esoteric shop in town. And I feel like a bookstore would work in there.
that would work great.
Ah,
And I think,
uh,
as I said, there's great restaurants in the area. I wish there were one or two more good standbys right in Phoenicia because it's limited.
yeah. Yeah.
There's really only one place that's open on a Tuesday, and maybe that's a place I don't want to go every Tuesday. Not
Yeah.
that we eat out that much, but if it happens to be a Tuesday, it'd
Totally.
be nice to
Yeah.
have some options.
Yeah. 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 I hear that. I hear that.
I think well, let me just keep going for a moment on what I would like.
Please.
I would like, Shay, if you're interested in creating a nice little wine bar or a place to have a beer and a nice little appetizer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Be really nice. So maybe that could be another part of your shop, like on the side.
My little kingdom on Main Street.
How about a newsstand? I know that that used to be, I don't know if Morn Import still has that, but it was nice you could get all kinds of local papers. But the fact of the matter is there aren't that many local papers anymore.
Yeah. It'd be great to have a local paper, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Mountain Eagle I like.
There used to be a Phoenicia paper, right?
It's great. Yeah, that was hyper local.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Hyper. I know it was so great. I love the little people, they ask people a question and they put their pictures and I
Yep,
love that.
that
I love
stands
that.
out still as like that pops right into my memory about that paper.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of the local news, like hyper local news, is Facebook generated now. So
Yeah.
not generated, but posted. So whenever I get frustrated with Facebook, I remember that I have to keep it because I'd miss out on a lot of things that are happening and just knowing what people are doing.
Totally. There really is a lot, like the Phoenicia page, the sort of Olive Town page. That's where you find out what's going on.
Yeah.
So
If it
I
wasn't
know.
for Phoenicia Library posting to Facebook, I wouldn't know about half of the things that go on.
Yeah. Shout out to the Phoenicia Library. I just want to say. So when you sent me your bio for this, I didn't realize that you've narrated 125 audiobooks. Um, and I want to just ask, like reading a book out loud, which we do in my liturgical book club, but having to read a book out loud where they're going to like record you. Is there any book that stands out that you read out loud that you were like, wow, I feel edified after this?
I mean, they've run the gamut. I do mostly nonfiction books, and some of them I learn a lot from. They're all a bit of a marathon in terms of performing them. And the first ones I did were in the city, in a studio, with a director and an engineer.
Wow.
And in a way, that was great because you were forced to sit in that seat and narrate for 4 hours come back the next day, narrate 4 hours, brief breaks for water or a snack bar, something like that. But it was really frightening because if you weren't feeling up to it, it didn't matter. You had to, a lot of jobs are being filled for those hours in the studio, and you had to, be on and ready. And now that most audiobook work nationwide is happening out of home studios now. So if you want to take a break and have lunch or take a nap, or you're just not feeling it, you have a couple of weeks to get it done. So you have that luxury, but it can draw on a little bit. And it's, you do miss something, having someone on the other side of the glass to direct, correct, redirect. So yeah, it's a really challenging bit of this business, which I really enjoy, but there's always a little bit of dread that goes into actually doing the work. It's hard to maintain that energy level and that connection for hours at a time.
When you were saying that about like, if you weren't really feeling it, you had to go in and sort of do it. I mean, this is not the same thing, but when I was at the monastery, I was, for many years, I was the liturgist, which is the chant leader who leads the liturgical chants. And, going through that training, I'm not a trained anything with my voice. And I was amazed at how you could not hide anything. I could not hide anything, like in terms of what I was feeling. Like when I was scared and like there was no way to hide that. It's like the very mechanism by which you experience anxiety is the mechanism that you're using when you're, recording something or chanting something. And so it's a very vulnerable instrument, I don't know. I just had that thought when you were talking about that.
And for short form work, it's easier. I can be in a mood, or I can be tired or angry, and I can jump in the booth and pull off a really happy spot. No problem. It's a switch. But the endurance that an audiobook takes, it's a little different. The last book I narrated was really interesting. I definitely took something from that one. It was called, or is called, it's actually, I don't think it's even been released yet. Release date is probably about the same time this podcast gets released, Jay. It's called Correction: Parole, Prison, and the Possibility of Change by Ben Austin. That was fascinating. Just learning about the prison system in America, and mostly parole, how parole works and doesn't work. I learned a lot from that. And the question is, how much of this do I retain after? Because a lot of it is also just like the mechanics of narrating a book. So some of it stick with me, and others,
you're not reading it for like comprehension of the content. You're reading it to convey.
Yeah. I mean, I have to comprehend it to convey it, but that's as far as it goes. And then I'm on to the next page.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
I listen to audiobooks when I'm making things like crocheting sweaters or making things in my studio. And I listened to Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead, which I think was like 20 hours. And it was one reader. And he was magnificent. I mean, I would not listen to 20 hours of anything. But there is something about having a good reader that is like essential, I mean, he inhabited like, I don't know, countless characters. It was kind of great, but 20 hours, I don't know how much recording time that actually was,
Well, I'm looking right now. I've just sorted by length of audiobook. The longest one I've done was 18 hours and 42 minutes.
Oh my God.
And it's called Dangerous Ground: America's Failed Arms Control Policy from FDR to Obama.
Far out. Wow.
And I'm pretty sure I did that one in studio at Audible in Newark. I can't remember. It might have been from my home studio. I can't remember, but it's that's a long book. But it didn't feel that long. That one felt like I was actively learning a lot as I went along. So it kept pulling me through.
Fascinating. And so you are a member of SAG-AFTRA.
Mm-hmm.
And so What's happening with the strike?
The strike, fortunately for me, doesn't affect voiceover work. It's for television actors. So yeah, I've paid less attention to it than I should as a union member, but because it's not affecting me
Mhm.
directly, I guess I'm dropping the ball there. But I'm thinking AI has a lot to do with it, that's a scary thing for all of us.
I was going to say, is that something that can replace voiceover work?
Yeah, with some formats better than others. So, for example, I used to do a lot of work for the military, believe it or not, for their training division. So they would hire me and other people who I would bring into my studio with different voice types and genders and all that to do computer-based training. So learning how to process paperwork or requisitions and all the stuff. So you needed a voice to go along with the slides. Since then, all of that has gone AI.
Wow.
And for that, I hate to say this, it sounds fine. if
Isn't
you
that
if you pay
wild?
if you pay close attention, you'll after a couple minutes, even someone who's untrained would probably notice that something's up.
Oh, interesting.
But it doesn't immediately sound like a computer, so that's pretty amazing. I don't think I hope that it won't replace audiobook performers anytime soon. I
That
mean,
seems like a real skill, actually.
fiction
Reading
or
an
non
audiobook isn't just like reading. It's, yeah.
fiction or nonfiction, there's a lot of performance that goes into it, and just telling a story in an authentic way. And I don't know if a robot can do that.
Oh,
For an on-hold message, hello, welcome to the bank. Please press 1 for this and 2 for this.
yeah.
It's a shame. People are going to lose their jobs, but
I was talking to a friend of mine who's writing a book. She's a spiritual worker and she's working on a book and she was making a graphic in Canva, that is related to a chapter of the book that she was writing. And there's this new AI feature in Canva. And she dropped a sentence from the graphic she was, from her chapter into the AI thing and it wrote a whole blog post.
wow.
And, she was like, it's not like me writing the book. And I just think about how manufacturing has been de-skilled, over time, how they've gone from, people working in factories who knew the whole process to like, you just get to know this little bit of it. And it's like they're de-skilling creative and spiritual work.
Gross, Shay, because
What did you say?
gross. It's gross because
Yeah.
if that's what content is now, putting a couple uh, of words into an AI generator and then coming up with a blog post and that becomes your work that you're putting into the world. What does that even mean? It's nothing. It's not your work.
I know, but it's like, do people on the other end know the difference between, someone who has, like my friend who's deeply researching a book, it's taking her years to write, or someone like me who's, done a lot of training and takes it all very, seriously and blah, 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 blah. It's like, I don't know. Do people know the difference?
I'm
I
hoping that
hope so.
there's still going to be gatekeepers or curators who can help us navigate that world and show us what is real. Because I for one don't want to waste my time reading something that a robot wrote. Who cares? That
And
the robot didn't write it anyway. Probably 100 other people wrote it years ago, and it's just putting it all together
there it
into
is. Yes.
new assemblage that doesn't mean anything.
And yet I will tell you, I have used ChatGPT to like generate copy for something that I needed that like wasn't,
Mhm.
that I just needed to do. There's that too. Oh God. Okay. I don't want to go down that rabbit
And
hole.
if you're using it to help you get to a more creative place, I guess that's okay. But I just don't want to see it become a substitute for human generated work or
From your,
creativity.
yeah, from your lips to goddess's ears, really. Before we move on to the Q&A quick fire round, I'm just curious if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about or want to let people know about.
I'm so nervous about the quick fire round, Shay.
You are? No,
I
really. Are you
don't like
being
being
this?
I don't like being interviewed for one, but looking at your face and the passion that you and preparedness with which you do these really does put me at ease. So
Oh
let's
my gosh, you're doing great. I
let's
mean, how is it for you on the other side? Like, it's vulnerable, right? Like when people interview me, I'm like,
yeah, I know why people don't like this because you are going to say something that's stupid or that wasn't well thought out and don't know how it's coming out on the other side. And as soon as I hit the, end meeting button, I'm sure I'll be like, oh God, why did I say that? Or why didn't I say this?
mm. Well, I think that so much, I think about Adrienne Marie Brown said that, conversation is its own creative art form. And I think that that's right, really, really true. And there's something about the connection between two people having a conversation that's actually, um, just as interesting and as important as any particular thing that either of us say. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
create
yeah.
something new. There's, I guess, an alchemy there.
I don't know what I'm going to say with these quick fire questions either. So I'm going to, we're both going to answer them. And like, you can also take your time and think about it. So quick fire is used loosely here. And if you want me to go first, tell me to go first and I will. But to begin with, Brett, what are you practicing right now?
This sounds silly, but I'm always practicing my craft, my profession.
Why
I'm
is that silly?
because it's what I'm doing anyway. But I feel like audio production is a practice. I'm always learning and growing, and so is teaching. And so I'm always working on that. And I'm right now, and I'm sorry, I don't know if quick fire means give a quick answer, but right
No,
now
take your time.
I'm teaching 5 separate classes this semester, which is a little ridiculous. So I'm not able to practice as much as I would like to in improving what I'm doing in those classes. Next semester is going to be great. I'm teaching 2 classes, and so
Wow.
I'm really looking forward to that focus that I'll have to be able to grow those classes in new and exciting ways that I don't have the chance to do when I'm just bouncing from one to another and just trying to juggle everything in a competent but maybe not a deep way.
Mm, mm. I think, yeah, I love that. There's nothing silly about practicing craft. 5 classes sounds like a lot, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. What am I practicing right now? I think I'm practicing like having my emotions, uh, having them and also not having them. There are times when I can tell that I'm kind of digging at myself, torturing myself a little bit. And so, like that's a moment to like redirect. And also just I think I said this in a previous episode, I found out that my cat has to have her leg amputated and I had a whole like breakdown in the reception area of the vet surgeon's office, that there's something about having people around, but not needing, I don't have to interact with them ever again. That kind of helps me have my feelings. So I've been practicing like this morning, I reached out to a couple of my besties to just like, you know, be transparent about my emotional state and be received in that. And um, yeah, it's kind of a roller coaster, I think that like being able to feel feels important to everything that I do. And also, yeah, there are times to kind of distract, redirect, numb out a little bit, quite honestly. So practicing like what is the balance of that, and not getting sort of too heavy in one direction. How's that? That's what I'm practicing.
Sounds worthwhile for sure.
What or who are you listening to right now?
uh, I'm listening to Shay and the Catskills. I'm listening to a lot of Taylor Swift. I have, uh, you know, let's say I have a daughter who really enjoys Taylor Swift, but the fact of the matter is that I also enjoy her. So,
I
just
love that.
we just went to watch the movie, and that was so much fun. The movie was basically the last of her concerts in that last concert series. So it was just a really tightly produced version of her concert where you're up close and personal. And I went with my wife and my daughter and two of my daughter's friends. So that was
Oh my God,
like,
I love that.
that experience, and also just the experience around it of being in the car and laughing and going out and hearing what's on these girls' minds and being like more than a fly on the wall. You're part of it and just laughing alongside them. And my immature sense of humor coming out and flourishing. So that was fun. I don't listen to I don't watch a lot. I don't consume too much digital media because I'm producing it, I guess. I enjoy producing it more than consuming it, but every once in a while there's a fun show that we'll get hooked into for a while.
I love so many things about the Taylor Swift story. Number one, shout out to all my friends out there who are parents of teenagers who like let their parents like interact with, like, I just think it's so amazing. Like when I was a teenager, I was like, stay away from me. Like you're the most embarrassing, it's just awful like that, And so I know a lot of people who have adolescent children who like are doing things like that, like actually spending time with them and taking, vacations with them and so on and so forth. I just love that. It warms my heart. And just shout out to you, that your adolescent children want to have a relationship with you and hang out with you. I love that. And did you read that piece that kind of went viral like a month ago about a man who's incarcerated who wrote about listening to Taylor Swift in prison?
Oh.
I think it was in the New Yorker.
Mm.
I'm going to send it to you. It was exquisite. It was just exquisite. Maybe I'll link it in the show notes for folks because it was really beautiful.
If Taylor Swift and I are both linked in the show notes, I'm in good company.
It's been a good episode when, right? Who or what am I listening to right now? I've been, I interviewed Letitia Barbier was my previous interview, came out today, and she mentioned Jeff Buckley's album Grace. And so I've been listening to that nonstop since she
Great
mentioned it. It's a great album, and which I've listened to thousands of times. That could have something to do with my emotional state too. Now that I think about it, which is funny, I don't often listen to music because it has such an impact on my emotional state. I mean, I know that's what it's for, but it's not great for me a lot of the time. It's great when I find music from people send me music I have no emotional like attachment to. That can be really fun, but that's what I've been listening to. What are you reading right now, if anything?
Yeah. Well, some visual aids here because
Yeah,
I can't remember what I'm reading to, because my wife jokes that I have stacks of books with bookmarks halfway through because I have a short attention span. But
same.
finally, I'm
Oh
reading
my
The
God.
Catskills by Alf Evers. And
Classic.
yeah, it's a classic that I've never read. And I just picked this up or won it at an auction. So I'm really excited about that. It's the original hardcover. So
Amazing.
this will take me through the winter for sure. And then this book I'm reading in preparation for an idea I have for the podcast. It's called It's 1:00 and Here is Mary Margaret McBride, a radio biography. Have you heard of Mary Margaret McBride, Shay?
Edify me.
Um, First lady of radio who just happened to have a house in Shokan, West Shokan, something like that. And it's fascinating. I was telling my wife, sometimes people will, that old question that people ask, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, I think I would want to have dinner with Mary Margaret McBride. After reading half of this book, I have half to go.
Wow.
But what an incredible woman who did a radio show in the 1940s and 50s that was on at 1:00. So it was competing with or existing with soap operas, and housewives were her major demographic. And she had a huge following. Her 10th anniversary, she sold out Madison Square Garden for this big extravaganza celebrating her show. And then for her 15th anniversary, she sold out Yankee Stadium with just, all her fans. And it was an interview show. I think you would
Oh
really.
my
Okay.
God.
Yeah, she interviewed everybody and anybody. Was good friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, and just had a guest a day, basically.
Wow.
And so fascinating story.
Oh,
Halfway
I
through.
love that.
So I'll be speaking with the author of the book for a future Kaatscast.
Oh my gosh, I'm on the edge of my seat.
And apparently her home still exists. Someone else lives in it now, but which is kind of cool. So maybe I'll try to figure out who that is and see if I can poke around that place.
I love that. That's such a three-dimensional like thing to do for an episode is to like, yeah, all the facets, who lives there now. I'm reading, I just started and I'm already sucked into A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It's a 700-page novel that is supposed to be like emotionally devastating.
Like a big one. Yeah, you just held it up. That's a
Yeah.
book.
I'm sensing a theme with myself. It's like, yeah, note.
Don't read it while listening to Jeff Buckley on a rainy day.
Or yes, scrolling my Twitter feed. None of that. Exactly. Exactly. So we covered what are you watching? What question are you living into right now?
Hmm. Can you go first on this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna think about it for a moment. What question am I living into right now? You know, the first thing that comes to mind is like, can I feel my body right now? I think that that is a question that before I'm like saying something that I regret or doing some, being reflexive or being urgent is like, can I feel my legs in particular? Is sort of like things move so fast. My mind moves so fast. My mouth can move really fast. I think I'm, living into the question of like checking in with my body. Can I actually feel my feet on the ground? Am I holding my breath? Like these kinds of questions, sort of somatic questions, if that makes sense, to kind of ground myself before doing something.
Yeah, good advice for
Evergreen, yeah.
I tend to shoot from the hip a little bit sometimes, so it's
Relatable. Yeah.
good to take a moment. Um, yeah, I guess my question is, what can or should I be doing, whether that's in response to something that's happening on a global scale or a local scale or in my own home.
I mean, what a question. Like speaking of evergreen questions, yes. What is keeping you up at night?
Well, I can fall asleep pretty easily, Shay. In fact, even midday, a good nap is something I really enjoy. Not much keeps me up, but what worries me, and again, let's go back to not being able to do much about world issues. So then I start to focus on just, things that I am responsible for, and the house that we live in is a big one. Worrying about everything from a little leak in the crawl space to does the roof need to be restored to how to keep mice and snakes out of the house. That's those are things that I ponder quite a bit because I feel responsible for keeping this place in the best condition that it can be, especially with other people living here. And you know, so those responsibilities, I guess, weigh on me.
Um,
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't. I'm just, sometimes I guess I wish I could be a little handier with certain things. So that's also a question. Is this something I can do, or do I need to hire someone to do this, or does it even need to be done?
Yes, yes, all of those things. Yeah, I've gotten quite handy since I moved back in here. Like I'm like feel like every person should get a cordless drill for their 12th birthday and learn how to use it. It's just like one of the most liberating things that I've done was gotten myself a cordless drill. Um, what is keeping me up at night? And shout out to sleep hygiene and being able to sleep well. It's like such a blessing to be able to sleep well.
I
Um,
have I have extraordinary sleep hygiene, Shay.
You and me both. I mean, I remember who told me this. So I heard somewhere that like a sleep disorder becomes a mood disorder. And
Mm.
I heard that and I was like, wow. Yeah. Um, if that's like the number one thing I take care of is like, because if you're not sleeping well, it's hard to function. Everything else kind of suffers. That being said, what is keeping me up at night? Global capitalism, fascism, the suppression and ethnic cleansing and genocide of people in the global south, climate change. Yeah, closer to home, my parents are aging. That keeps me up. Keeps me up, worries me. I sleep fine. That is a distinction to make. Yeah, I think those are the things that are worrying me right now. And, you know, I also have been recognizing that worry often is a stand-in for feeling things, kind of the function of sort of the mind turning something over and over and over is often to kind of keep me out of, emotions, and which, thank goodness for that. Um,
See, this is why I didn't want to do this interview, Shay, because your listeners are going to say, well, Shay's worried about fascism and global climate change, and Brett's worried about a leaking pipe.
well, let me tell you something, about what a leaking pipe can do. Be a total nightmare. I mean, look, I let's not have any hierarchy of things that we're worried about here. I think anyone living in the Catskills, whether they're a renter or an owner, is worried about leaky pipes and things that happen with the coming of climate change. You know, I
I'll,
mean,
tell, I'll tell you one more thing on a global level that I'm not, yeah, I'm worried about it. I'm more upset about it than anything. I just audited a class called Beyond Plastic, and it was through Bennington College. Judith Enck teaches the class, and she founded or co-founded the Beyond Plastics group. And I learned a lot more than I thought I would learn because I already kind of knew a lot about that world. But that's been something on my mind. Um, and I can do my best to get away from plastic, but what's that going to achieve? Not much.
well, I'm sure you'll remember that when I was at dinner at your place and one of your children was doing that, like, how many light bulbs are in your house? And I was
Yeah.
like, ask your teacher how much energy the US military uses. Your light bulbs don't matter at all. Um,
Yeah.
all of those things are true. I've heard there's microplastics in clouds now
Mm.
and like in rain,
Well,
which,
it's in us. Microplastics are in us,
oh, yeah. Oh, God.
and there's nanoplastics, which are smaller than microplastics, which uh, you know that are in our blood. So it's really scary,
God.
and it's not going anywhere soon because it's the plan B has always been for the fossil fuel industry to go to plastic because plastics are made with oil and fracking gas. So it's just another industry that all this money is going into. You would think we'd be pulling away from it at this point, but we're just going more in. And not to get political, but the new Speaker of the House is going to move things even more in that direction because he comes from a state that relies heavily on those industries. Louisiana is, uh, I think, is the top plastic producer in the country, Louisiana or Texas, because
Isn't
that's
it
where
amazing that
the oil.
these Christo-fascist ghouls come from these states where there's so many poor people,
Yeah,
you
and they don't
know?
see any of the benefit.
No. This is why we don't end on this particular question. What's inspiring you now?
Um, my daughters,
Mm, mm.
I'm really proud of them. The older one's in college, and she's just totally embraced that experience.
Mm.
It's only been a couple months, and you're always really concerned as a parent with these big life changes, and she was really nervous right beforehand, and there was a moment where I thought she might not go through with this. She was talking about a gap year and all this, and I'm thinking, well, that's not gonna that's only going to delay your nervousness, so you need to jump in, and if you still feel this way in 2 weeks, we'll pick you up. That never happened because
Mm.
she's just relishing the whole experience, which is awesome. And then my younger daughter sticking with a sport that she likes, but I don't know that she loves. It was and doing all of the practices and games even when she felt like she couldn't. Um, and going to work. She works once a week, and even doing that through the school year. That's an inspiration to me.
Mm. I love that so much. And shout out to you and Rebecca. I mean, just, of course, you have these, amazing, inspiring children. I love that. What a
Yeah.
great answer.
Thanks.
What is inspiring me now? Um, I'll tell you, when I saw the crowds at Grand Central Station last night doing a sit-in, I saw the crowds, hundreds of thousands of people in London today. People putting their bodies out in public space saying like, nope, this is not okay. That is very inspiring to me. I'm a very hermetic person. Um, you know, Being in the streets with a lot of people is not my ministry. It's just for many reasons. And so I'm really inspired by people who, work all week and have families to take care of and then show up for things like that. That is extremely inspiring to me. And the people who continue to kind of speak out at the cost of their jobs and their, it's sort of like it's a moment for that. So I'm very inspired by people's hearts. What has your attention right now?
It was an awkward pause. Uh,
I love it. Here's to like a real conversation where we like take our time.
well, there's no escaping the news, so that has my attention, whether I want it to or not.
Yeah.
The weather has my attention.
Yeah.
This is a remarkable fall. Um, Whether it's a good or a bad thing for all the organisms that inhabit this area of the world, that's another question. But and how quickly things move. I teach, and we're already more than halfway through the semester. We're already thinking about Thanksgiving and having Charlotte come home and with friends and all that kind of like stuff that's just on the horizon has my attention.
Yeah. Fall has my attention. Uh, the temperature and everything, but the color, those sugar maples just every year, it's like, what are they going to do? And they are really, it's just, I was driving back from Kingston the other night and just, you know, the way the mountain looks this time of year is just so unbelievable, and it's like, you never know. Is this the last one I get? We don't know. Um, and so, yeah, that I'm really trying to kind of soak that in, and appreciate. It looked like it was going to be a very dull and muted autumn kind of at the end of last month, but it really came through. Um, and so the last question, how are you evolving right now?
Well, I hope that I'm better able to let things roll off my back a little bit. Um, Not get so upset about little things that happen in my life that don't really matter. I think I'm moving in that direction. I think my wife would attest to that. So that's evolving.
She would know. That's
I
amazing.
don't let the little it sounds trite, but try not to let little things bother me. And I think that I'm doing pretty well at that. And then, yeah, I think life is a series of, not a series, but a long string of evolution. So I've never been one for New Year's resolutions, because I think that every day can be a resolution or just one more step in a direction that you want to be. So do my best.
Mm, I love that. Can I just jump on that bandwagon?
Please.
Yeah, I feel like I really appreciate what you're saying about, you know, these sort of micro evolutions that you can, that every day is sort of a chance to evolve. And yeah, I really relate to that. It does feel very day by day. What you were saying about time, things moving so fast. It's like, I really cannot believe the speed at which life is moving. Um, and so I think like concentrating on the micro is always like the best place to concentrate instead of like this grand gesture evolution. Um, yeah, I hope I'm evolving in the direction of remembering really what I love and what's most important and giving that my attention because it's so easy for it to get pulled um, in places that are going to be upsetting or distracting or designed to make me enraged and I have no problem with being enraged, but to just be remembering like who and what and where I love and letting that kind of be um, what's pulling me in a direction. I hope that's how I'm evolving right now.
I'll tell you one micro evolution. Last week, I deleted Facebook from my phone. That's been a big help.
Snap, snap over here. Yes.
I'll check in once a day now, but that that phone scrolling, that always very often, more than anything else, will put me in a dark space.
It's
I don't want
designed
to be in.
to.
And then,
Right.
that comes out in real life, and then other people around me suffer. So I don't want that.
Do you know how to put your phone on grayscale? That's what I also
Uh,
put my phone on
I tried
grace.
it. I tried it briefly, and I was depressed, so I put it back in. That's a
Yeah.
delicate balance with the phone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm thinking I went off social media last winter or last fall and winter, and I'm thinking about doing that again. You know, it's like for what? For be on there for what? I'm interested to sort of see how my mental health and my anxiety and so on improve when I'm not looking at that. I'm
As we
informed
as
enough.
as we mentioned before, unfortunately, it is a source for what's happening in the community. But there's so
Yeah.
much other garbage on there, and so many ads. It's just like, where did all these ads come from? I come here to see what people I know and care about are up to, not, and then it turns into something other than that really quickly, and then I don't realize it's turned into something other than like that, and then I'm scrolling, wondering why I'm getting so angry,
It's like it's happening again.
and then my bedtime gets even earlier because I just can't deal with the world, and I was like, good night.
It's
Uh,
better than your bedtime getting later because that's the worst is to be up late scrolling. That's like going
no,
on a scrolling bender.
when I can't handle something, I might just shut down. I go to sleep. So I
Mm.
guess that's a good defense mechanism. It saves people from my aggravation coming out vocally.
So how do you feel like we did? Do you feel like before we close this out, like was this as scary as you thought it was going to be, or do you feel like it went okay?
No, it was good. I think I hope I was able to answer your very profound questions in a way that I won't find embarrassing later on when I listen to this.
Maybe so. May there be no embarrassment about the amazing conversation that we've had. And thank you so much for taking the time today, Brett.
Thank you, Shay. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy speaking with you in any context.
Oh, me too.